Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations on Sex, Addiction, and Relationships. I'm Tim Stein, and I am joined today, as always, with my friends and colleagues Dan Drake, Wendy Conquest, and Jeannie Vitoni. This is a mailbag episode, and we're going to answer some of the questions that our fine viewers have sent in to us.
What do we got?
And I don't know what he's going to say.
Question number one. From the addict's perspective, what about all the concerns that I've got in the relationship?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. No, those are important. Those
Yeah.
are important. So I'm just gonna, okay. So when someone comes to the emergency room and they've been shot and they're bleeding and they're in pain and they're wheeling them in and it's loud and it's chaotic and we're taking their history as quickly as we can and we learn they're diabetic. Do we treat diabetes or do we treat the gunshot wound? I'm going to propose that we treat the gunshot wound. And learning about betrayal is like being shot and run over. So it's not that the diabetes in this metaphor or analogy are are unimportant. Those are important, but we can't deal with them right now. First, we need to stabilize. So we need to stabilize. And as that gets worked through, then we're going to start to say, what else is here in the relationship that maybe we need to address also?
Mhm.
But it's really important it not happen at the front. We
Yeah.
have to deal with the betrayal trauma first.
Jeannie, the way that I do this is I draw a triangle for my clients, and at the top of the triangle, I have sex addiction, and underneath that, I have marital issues.
Mhm.
And I say basically, until the sex addiction piece is addressed and in remission in some way, we cannot get to the underlying marital issues. And most people get that. I think the big question is, well, how long, how long for the addict? Well, how long do I need to wait until I can start voicing? Because in recovery, they're told you have feelings, you have needs, you need to be voicing them, you need to be expressing them. And then a lot of times I would say they start doing that, and the partner's like, I don't want to hear it. Like, I do not want to hear this right now. And then they're confused because they're like, wait a minute, this is supposed to be healthy. And you're telling me, you don't want to hear it. And then, depending on who they're seeing for therapy or support, they might be told, well, she's wrong. This is healthy behavior. We want you to be healthy. What do you think?
I think that right there has caused a lot of problems in relationships that are trying to heal from sex addiction and betrayal. Because
Yeah.
again, while those other marital issues are important,
Mhm.
the timing of when we work on those and address those is critical.
Yeah. Dan, you were going to say?
Yeah, I 100%. I mean, I use the same example. I say the same thing, so I agree with you. I'm just trying to channel some of what I hear from addicts, and they would say, okay, fair enough, but the marital issues are linked to my sex addiction, and that's what, and maybe at that point they're saying this is what led me to, the lack of sex or the lack of whatever is what led me to this point of needing to find other avenues to meet my needs or whatever. I'm not saying that's the most sophisticated answer.
To me,
I get it, but that's what right. But that's what I hear.
but
Oh, I
that's
hear
not, I
that.
mean, addiction doesn't suddenly start, oh, I'm in this relationship and she doesn't want to have sex with me, and therefore I'll become an addict, right? Addiction typically is something that's happened way long ago that is slowly forming over time. And while that could be a factor, it's not a cause.
Yeah, but Tim, what were you going to say?
I was
Hang
going to say,
Watch
my
Jeannie go off the
guess,
handle.
my guess is that and because I hear those same things in my office, but I usually hear that from guys that are within the first year of recovery,
Yeah, right. Really.
And what I usually say is, look, starting off, we got to lean heavily into sort of supporting your partner, doing their healing, sort of recognizing their trauma, There's going to be dynamics in your coupleship. If we can talk about them, great, but don't count on it. Once we get, once they get more established as the addict in their sobriety, leaning into recovery, they're starting to live their life and sort of approach their relationships in a different way. And then we can start stepping into the relationship stuff. And the partner may not like that. The partner might have gotten very comfortable with, I get to be angry and I get to sort of say what I want, and you just do what I say, and you don't push back and try to negotiate with me. And sometimes there's having to be a reestablishing of balance and partnership in that relationship that can be difficult on the addict side. It can also be difficult on the partner side, but that is not work to be done like right off the bat. Usually, I would say not within the first year or so.
And I think and we talk about timing. There's a couple things I was thinking as you said that, Tim. I've also seen this play out not just in the first year, but it's the attitude, right? If it's, well, what about me and my needs? I mean, I can see that playing out. It doesn't just stop over time. It just keeps, I don't know for you guys, but it keeps going and going and going because who's the focus at that point? It's the addict saying, what about me? What about me? When the betrayed partner is saying, I need you to understand and really get the impact of what you've done and it's the actions. And I feel like it's not until the partner gets that the addict gets it, that's when things start to shift a bit. But if the addict's like, yeah, I know I betrayed you, I did this, but there's these other things, and what about me? I mean, I just feel like that dance goes on for so long, and the partner starts to like continues to feel you don't really get it, you don't really, you haven't. I don't see your full the weight of that you really understand it and that you're invested in me and my healing and my grief and pain and trauma and this.
I like, Dan, when you like me and my needs. I think that's really important because if the addict is taking that kind of persona, like what about me and my needs, then just like you said, they're sort of missing the boat on leaning in to be with someone who's in deep pain of the betrayal. And therefore, trust isn't being built. So we've got to look at the psychological sort of priority triage list here of leaning into doing that work. But if you keep it's about me and my needs, it could be the first year, it could be the second, third, fourth, fifth year. The betrayed partner will not have a sense that this person sees and understands and builds trust. And now I can be there and hear what they have to say too. And so I think
sorry,
people
go ahead,
do
Wendy.
themselves a disservice when they walk in with, well, what about my needs?
Right.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because if you take a couple and sex has not been happening in the relationship, so that's I think the addict can say this wasn't happening, and so I got upset, and so I went outside the marriage. So I have a need to be sexual. And it's like, wait a minute, can we just put a pause on this for a minute? Isn't it a lot more complicated and a lot more nuanced than that? So aren't there so many more questions? Like, well, um, have the two of you talked about what you think about sex and what sex is for and how your first sexual experiences went and were they good sexual experiences or not? If they weren't, then are we talking about a redo for those very first, very highly sensitive, emotionally charged experiences where, oh my gosh, so those experiences can go really wrong. So what are we talking about there? Because I think when a sex addict says there's not enough sex, it's a lot more complicated than just that.
Well, and I think what you're saying, I'm thinking of a situation, no identifying information. I was talking to somebody and he tells me, it's my birthday and I really had this hope and expectation of having sex with my partner. At the end of the day, we didn't have sex and I felt really hurt and wounded. That was the story. That's the narrative. And I was like, well, walk me through what happened here. So then he paints a story of how he basically flirted with a waitress at dinner. He was a giant jerk to his wife most of the rest of the day. He was passive aggressive and punishing her and not kind and like all these things. And you know, those are the things that were left out. So we hear the I hear the we didn't have sex, but you know, the other piece of the story is how did you show up in this relationship? And there's probably a reason. I asked him, I said, so let me ask you, if would you want to have sex with you in that situation, like if you were your wife? And he kind of was like, oh, like it's this, look how you show up. So just because you're not having sex, there's probably other reasons going on. There's probably other stuff in the relationship, and I think that's what gets missed.
So let me pause, move on to the next question.
Oh, no, 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 no. One
Oh,
second.
Yeah, I have something else too on that.
oh, no.
I
Okay.
think I am a firm giant believer that when I hear the complaint of we haven't had sex in years, and this is part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. First of all, I think that's displacement. That's not accurate, and it's much more complicated. But I really truly believe that betrayed partners, pre-discovery, intuitively sense something is not right. And they don't feel emotionally, sexually safe, or which then creates lower interest, lower libido. They're not interested. Some partners are very interested, but some partners are not interested in being sexual because something doesn't quite feel right and can never make sense of it until discovery day. And so when someone says, well, we haven't had sex in years, and I'm like, oh, all right, well, how long's the addiction been going on? Oh, that's been going on for 30 years, 3 decades. Okay. So I think there's this other piece of it's floating in the relationship often, which then creates for one of the people in the relationship, I don't know that I really am interested in being sexual. Something doesn't feel right, whether they have conscious awareness or unconscious awareness. So many times when people get into discovery, they go, oh, that's probably why I didn't want to be sexual. Or that's why he or she didn't want to be sexual with me. So I hear this complaint of no sex and I go, okay, but what was happening before discovery? Because all of that was sort of contaminating the soil. So what grows is different. And I think
Yeah.
that's important to validate those experiences out there.
I just had one other thing to add to this of this question, because sometimes I hear it, um, if the addict expressing that, what about me and my needs in this relationship? And then the other part is it all feels to be about my partner. Everything's about them. I have to do all these things about my partner. And they'll say it kind of feels lopsided, like it's all about them and their needs and not about mine. And needs, that's a whole other thing, and boundaries and all that. That's a whole other conversation. But I try to say, I think what addicts tend to forget is, you know, how many months, years, decades were you keeping a secret and keeping this life hidden from your partner? And if knowledge is power, because they'll somehow feel, oh, my partner has all the power in the relationship now. It's all about them and their needs and everything's focused on them. And if knowledge is power, power, you've wielded power in the relationship, whether you felt it or not, for months, years, decades. And yes, it might feel a little imbalanced. We're going to rebalance it, but this was way out of balance for a long time prior to discovery and getting to help and treatment. So I think that's something that people tend to forget, and I think it's important to be mindful of.
So what I hear sort of coming up is for addicts early in recovery, yeah, it's going to feel out of whack. Your needs are not going to be the priority. It's going to be all about your partner's needs. That is going to rebalance in the relationship with time, with sobriety, with recovery, with healing of your partner's trauma wounds. But it's not going to be overnight. It's going to take time. And really, you're going to be better served as an addict if you're focusing on yourself and what's going on your side and what you're bringing to the relationship than if you're focused on your partner and what they are or are not bringing that you're frustrated about. Am I kind of summarizing that accurately for y'all?
Great
Yeah.
job.
And if I
Great
could
job.
say that for addicts to really start identifying with their therapist, with other men in 12-step programs is this a need, right? Is this a real need? Where is it coming from? Is this something, and going back into inner child work or family of origin work is what authentically what needs were not met and how do they manifest? To just start to become really clear, because sometimes people think they have a need and it's actually a reactive piece. I would say.
Yeah, we often confuse what's a want versus what's a need.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today in this mailbag conversation. Turned out one question, but what a rich conversation that we had. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us wherever you're listening to us. And if you feel like it, which I hope you do, also like us on that platform and then come back and join us for more conversations in the future. If you have questions you would like us to address in the mailbag, email us. Email address here is conversations.sar@gmail.com.
And
And
please subscribe.
subscribe on on behalf, that's the word I'm looking for, on behalf of one of those words of the whole Conversations crew. Thanks for joining us today.
Bye, everyone.
Right.